So Joe got some money from young Aunt Minnie and Uncle Angus and Grandpappy and Mr. Titus. When Joe's friends and relatives used their savings to help him buy tools and property, they were capitalists. Don't blush, folks. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
And now then, because we are introducing this amazing item for the first time, all you have to do is sign this little scrap of paper, and you get your bottle absolutely free.
Get out of the way!
Pardon me.
And who are you, my good man?
I'm John Q. Public.
Ah, my fine friend, you're just in time to share this generous and gigantic offer. Sign right here.
Mind if I read it first?
I mean, so I'll go to a point Naomi said. She said it started this year with the Arab Spring. I mean, I would locate it far further back. I mean, we've got a number of dynamics at work here with certain dates in mind. So obviously the primary one is the fall of Lehman. None of this is possible post-2008 without the fall of Lehman.
The mess we've got into since 2008 is symptomatic of, an industry which has become unbalanced and there are no effective restraints in place and the incentive structures are wrong. There is a concern about the activities of the financial services industry, that they're out of control. And there is a concern about the financial services industry and their relationship with government. And I think Occupy is united by a sense that government is not operating properly in the interests of the general population, that finance is not being effectively regulated. There's sort of the anti-banker sentiment, which is at heart is about placing, moral restraints on what bankers do. There should be a sense of social responsibility for people who work in finance. What are you giving back to the country you live in? Why, are you paying your taxes? Are you putting something back?
In my view, if I was advising the movement, which I'm not, but if I was going to, I'd say it's too narrow at the moment. You need to start broadening out. It's the Bank of England that's creating inflation, pushing prices up. It's the politicians that bailed out the banks. If you really want to start winning people over and having a broader pool, you've got to move down the road. You are targeting and trying to shut down the stock exchange. You're targeting the ones. You're targeting the one bit of the city that can drag us out of this mess. You've got to branch out. You've got to attack the politicians. If you want your voice to be heard and continue to be heard in the same level and get the same kind of unprecedented levels of media coverage, in my view, that you've got so far, you've got to branch out and it's got to move down the road to Westminster.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough in the initial thing I said that. We're talking about, yes, finance and sort of the moral constraints on finance or the lack of them, but also the relationship between finance and government. I did actually say that. So, yeah, I mean, how our politics operates and whether people are really accountable, people feel truly enfranchised, yes, is a very big part of what we're talking about.
My name's Gabriel Balfe. I've been at Occupy LSX on and off for a fair few times. I was also in the student movement a large part last year. I wanted to respond to Harry's point about targeting politicians, about all that. Numerous people have been targeting politicians, haven't they? A friend of mine was arrested 2 nights ago for participating in an unauthorised demonstration in Parliament Square. I've known people who have got beaten, who've gone hospitalised for while protesting outside Parliament Square. There is now an awareness, though, that while these guys are completely inept and are part of the problem, the financial sector is also a huge part of the political makeup of our circumstances, and they both need to be addressed here.
Yeah.
Just as a piece of advice more than a question, I mean, one person saying it's too narrow, another person saying it's too broad. My piece of advice is literally just come down to St Paul's. It's 20 minutes away and see for yourself, talk to the people, share your own opinions, watch the meetings, see how it's done, see how it's organised. And I promise you, my personal guarantee is that you will be surprised because it's not what it says in the media. It's different and you will be surprised.
I'm just asking if there is more.
Yeah, so in my work in Kenya, so WikiLeaks started out as an organisation that we wanted to tackle the most closed societies on earth. And so, yes, we thought that included the former Soviet, included China, and included corrupt African dictatorships. But what I found working in Kenya is that when money was looted from the Kenyan treasury, billions of dollars looted from the Kenyan treasury, it flowed out of Kenya and it flowed into London. And it flowed into New York properties. And it flowed into 10,000 hectare ranches in Australia. And the reality is that there's not a single significant piece of developing world corruption that does not end up in the Western world. And now you might say, well, that's great for England. That's what England has always done and it's worked so far. But I'm telling you what happens when London banks become part of that corrupt cycle of ripping off money from the developing world. They themselves become corrupted. And now we have situations in Western world banks that corruption that was developed to fleece the developing world is now being turned in on us as a result.
Several people have said the solution to this is totally uncharted territory. We don't know where we're going, where we need to go. There's one progressive economist in the U.S. who I think would disagree with that, Elizabeth Warren, who feels that we know what the solution is. It's the social contract that Franklin Roosevelt created and that has been over the last 30 years dismantled. You know, she points out there was a bank run, there was a bank collapse in the U.S. every 10 to 12 years like clockwork till 29. Glass-Steagall gets passed. There is no banking run. There is no collapse until 1980. Reagan comes in, boom. 87, you get the S&L crisis. Then 99, Glass-Steagall gets repealed. And if Glass-Steagall were still the law of the U.S. land, 2008 would not have happened. So her point is, we know what the right answer is. It sure as hell isn't socialism. I lived in the Soviet Union. God knows I don't want to go back to that. It's what FDR created. There is actually a model there that we know works, and we stupidly dismantled it.
Okay, thanks.
So this idea that we're now going to return to a 1931-style assessment with Roosevelt, I find really unlikely for several reasons. So if you look at, for instance, if you look at the role of UK and cut, for instance, with regards to tax justice, we now know we live in a globalised political economy where we have the free movement of persons, goods, capital. We know that. And it now looks like the nation state is no longer capable of being able to get sufficient tax capture to pay for the welfare state as we've known it since 1945. That seems to be the case. So how do we do that? There's two options. We'll either have a globalised tax regime, so we harmonise things like corporation tax, income tax could be on a regional level, like with the European Union, or it could be a globalised initiative, say something like the G71. We might have harmonised corporation tax, or we might eventually just have the kind of compromise where we eradicate the welfare state as we know it. It's probably going to one of two ways in the next couple of decades, we know that. So the idea that we're going to have the reformation of the Roosevelt ideal of 1931 along the lines of national representative democracy I find really problematic, because the nation state is no longer the main game in town. The role of politicians and what next? Politicians, Nick Clegg was in Tottenham a few days after riots, and he said, I'm going to give these people optimism and hope. Because that's what politicians deal with, is affect, it's emotional disposition. They can't actually interfere with the social relations of production anymore. They haven't been able to since the mid-70s, because that's how neoliberalism works. If the spreads go on Italian debt more than 6%, it doesn't matter if it's the left, the centre, or the right. They have to impose austerity measures, because otherwise they can't shift their debt. Finance markets won't buy it. It's as simple as that. So with that kind of stranglehold of international markets buying sovereign debt, you have essentially a one-party state in places like Greece and Italy, and increasingly I think we'll see here.
Well, perhaps I'll merge this into this question about the rule of law. In my work with Guantanamo Bay and other CIA black sites and tax havens, I found something similar, which was a coordinated, systematized attempt to evade the accepted rule of law in one nation by laundering out money, in the case of tax havens, to small offshore jurisdictions that could be easily manipulated, and people, in the case of Guantanamo Bay and the renditions program. So there's a systemized movement by the elite in various countries to obey the rule of law, and in essence to create a new law for people who are close to power compared to the rest of the population. And that's a serious problem.
Antonio Gramsci.
Another thing which is wrong with this idea, this form of egalitarianism, it may seem to be radical, but it's not at all. Because if you say that you believe in global equality, and at the same time you say we've got scarce resources, we've got one planet, we're running out of resources, what the demand for equality means is that we should all make sacrifices. That's what Barack Obama has said. He believes in shared sacrifice. That's what all of these billionaires, who like Warren Buffett in America, who've gone around saying, I'll accept to pay higher tax cuts. What they really want is for everyone to make sacrifices. So essentially, if this movement is saying anything coherent at all, it's really saying, we're making sacrifices, most of us are making sacrifices, so rich people should make sacrifices at all. I would rather be against this form of egalitarianism and against sacrifice. Let's move forward rather than moving back.
What we're talking about is a movement which is absolutely open and transparent. People are shockingly talking about what they think, and they're discussing it, and they're voting on it, and they're being seen to dissent about it, and their decision making is there in front of people's faces. And the one thing that doesn't happen in this world, which is why you're utterly wrong in your analysis, because this is so radical and so not conservative, this is a thing that doesn't happen in the City of London. The whole of the City of London is designed on the basis of providing secrecy. Tax havens exist to absolutely and emphatically provide secrecy, an imperfection, of course, in every market theory. It's wonderful that right-wing economists defend tax havens when their whole purpose is to provide market imperfection. I think that's an extraordinary thing. But what happens as well is you add a tax haven to a multinational corporation and you end up with complete and utter opacity. You have no chance whatsoever of finding out what a multinational corporation does in a tax haven at all, or indeed within its own accounts. You know, GE Capital is the biggest company I've found in the world so far. It has 8,000 subsidiary companies, and we do not know about 1 cent of trading from one of those companies to another one of those companies and the decision processes involved. BP, the biggest I found in the UK, 1,700 companies. We have no idea why they trade with each other in the way they do. All we know is it's designed to make damn sure that tax isn't paid and power is removed. And the focus of that entire structure is the City of London. And the traditional point of descent in the City of London was the west end of St Paul's Cathedral. This whole camp could not be located in somewhere more historically appropriate.
So just a few points. So with regards to Harry, who was saying, who are the 1%? Now, in Gramscian political economy, there's something called the transnational capitalist class. So with the end of the ontological primacy of the nation-state, because we now have transnational capital, we now have transnational labour markets, we have transnational commodity chains, it's perfectly sensible we have a transnational capitalist class. That's how it works. So I have friends who are political risk analysts in the city. You know, when the crap hits the fan, they're going to go to Qatar, Malaysia, or Singapore. That's natural because they're members of the transnational capitalist class. People likewise that go to Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore are going to come here right now. You know,
the technology gives and technology takes away. In the last 20 years, technology has meant that banks and companies can transact with each other faster than ever before. They can convey the instruments of wealth and do so in secrecy and do so at lightning speed. There is now only 220 milliseconds between New York and Nairobi for a banking transaction. That means that money controlled by corporations that have the ability to enjoy those transactions, this is a lot more than 30 seconds.
It is. I was going to point that out.
Enjoy those transactions, are able to move stolen wealth faster than political sanction. And political sanction moves a lot slower, and political sanction is a derivative of moral sanction. As a result of the communications revolution, we are able to move moral sanction faster than we could before and coordinate it more than we could before. And our real task is to breach both the speed and complexity and secrecy of those financial institutions that hide their immoral conduct using those 3 methods.
Thank you very much.
You know, including my freedom. Freedom? What? Sign away my freedom. Why, this is ridiculous.
Don't be corny, brother.
Before we throw it away for some double talk, sure, our system of free enterprise isn't perfect. Let's turn the clock back a few years to see what it's done for us. Today, the automobile industry never provides millions of jobs that existed before. And remember, this is a story of only one industry. There are thousands more scattered all over the United States whose history of development is pretty much the same. That's just a sample of the things the system has given us. Before signing up, you boys ought to try a little taste of Dr. Ism's formula to see what you'd get in exchange for your freedom. Go ahead, try it.
You can't do this to me! I'll strike!
The state forbids strikes.
I'll take this case to the Supreme Court.
The state is the Supreme Court.
We must fight to regain our freedom, or everything is lost. Everything!
Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.